The U.S. brags about the financial pressure that's falling onto Russia, as I seem to think it might be time that we're starting to get some Ukraine fatigue as well. But we'll talk just a bit about what's going on that in the headlines and out of headlines from what I'm seeing all over the internet as we go. In other news, DeSantis is in the hot seat this week because apparently he has scolded a group of university students for wearing a mask. We'll watch the video and we'll decide whether it's a scold or whether it's actually something normal here. Joe Manchin has thrown cold water on Joe Biden's Build Back bullshit plan yet again. So we'll talk just a bit about what's going on with that. And a woman in Green Bay is charged in what I can only describe as the weirdest news story I've ever heard about a meth-fueled sex, rage, murder, decapitation. I don't know. We got to go look at this and see it. It is going to be all this and more over Contemporary. You're just mad you can't date me. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning, Ed Heads. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar, and as usual, we have got a bunch of news to get to over here. A lot of it has to do with Ukraine, but we're going to see if we can fly through it and get to some of the other stuff as well. A lot of finance stuff here. Interestingly enough, the finances rose in spite of the fact that Powell is out here saying he's going to jack the interest rates yet again. So, and I don't even have that story on the stack here because we're out of space here, but we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about that in finance, and we'll see what's going on with that over here on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go and check out turnsofpagesproductions.com. Turnsofpagesproductions.com is going to be your one-stop shop for all of your news and commentary needs. We are on a start page right now, so go and check that out. And while we're getting started, where we're getting everything up and ready to go, you can go check out great shows such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys, and a new upcoming project with Britt and Sean Hickman. It's going to be a great time. Steven, in the near future, will be releasing an album coming up here. I've heard that I've heard that it's good. I've not listened to it because it's not out yet, so that's going to be dropping really, really soon. I hope you guys get to hear that. That's going to be pretty awesome coming up here. Daily Ignoramus, I believe, is coming back today, so go and check that out, and we will see what happens with that. And if you do have a couple bucks to give, still can't get the government name scrubbed off of there yet, but go check out Turns of Pages 101 over on Give, Send, Go. And for those of you in the know, if you want to drop a couple bucks into that, that's going to help us out a big time. A little bit of a stall going on right now because of some unforeseen life events happening here. So we'll figure out what happens with that and where we can go with that. But go and check that out. And yeah, for those of you in the know, you'll be able to see it. Once I can get my government name scrubbed off of there, then we can go and check that out and get that promoted out to the main pages as well. So go and check that out. Give, Send, Go. All right, let's look at the finance here. The Dow had a relatively up day up to 33,891.35. Couldn't quite break 34,000. It did get close to there throughout the day there, but it didn't. I don't think it quite broke it. Yeah, intraday we got to 33. 99706 was the intraday high off of there. So not quite able to break that. Relatively steady, kind of a jump up and maybe a climb and a claw throughout the middle of the day, but just kind of steady throughout the rest of the day. So we'll see what happens with that and where that goes. Looking in at your Bitcoin, Bitcoin is to 43,707 US dollars and 50 US cents per coin. Kind of steady also throughout the day here, kind of sitting where it was yesterday, a little bit lower, 0.5% lower just about, but not really dropping or rising. A little bit of a whipsaw throughout the middle of the day here. But it looks like what's going to be holding Bitcoin up is it's going to be one of the few ways to digitally support the people of Ukraine and even some of the people of Russia. I know that there are people that are using that to support that as well around the country as allies, because all the rest of the banks haven't got them shut off. So we will see what happens with that and where that goes. Scrap metal. Look at all that green on the scrap metal prices. They need stuff so they can come back out and make stuff. I mean, we're not looking at mixed markets until we get down into the other things that aren't on the main markets here. But for copper, steel, and aluminum are all on the rise right now as far as scrap metal prices go. And actually looking in, the only thing that's down right now on the main three is aluminum radiators. And sheet aluminum looks like has dropped now too. That was in the green earlier when I looked at this. Looking in at some of the individual plays, electric motors, ballasts are both down. Lead and batteries are up. All catalytic converters are up right now. Compressors are down. Alternators are down. Carbide is up. Hard drives are down. Motherboards are up. Power supplies are down. Low-grade boards are down. And PC tower is down. So your main metals, your industrials, are facing up right now. But it looks like some of your computer parts are facing down. So I don't know. Maybe we'll be seeing some action into the auto market coming up here as, you know, all the restrictions are lifted. So by all intents and purposes, we should start seeing cars flowing into these lots at some point here at some point. It would be a shame if this was all just because it was politics, but, you know, we can't say that. It couldn't be all about politics. Shutting everything down, limiting the supply chain, none of that could be about politics. By the way, speaking of cars, in some bad news, a few weeks ago, we got word that there was a ship carrying exotic luxury cars that had caught fire in international waters that has officially sank. Which means that your Porsche, your Volkswagen prices are probably going to go up at the dealership. So if you want that new Volkswagen, it might be time to go and check that out now. But that's what we're seeing coming off the metals. Let's see what's happening on IBD. Dow futures inch up ahead of ceasefire talks. Snowflake crashes on earnings from Scott Latonin. Dow futures defended narrow gains Thursday morning ahead of a possible second round of Russia-Ukraine ceasefire talks and additional Fed Chief Jerome Powell testimony before Congress. Treasury yields moved quietly lower while U.S. oil prices briefly surged above $116 a barrel before pairing gains. After the close on Wednesday, Snowflake and Pure Storage were among the companies reporting their quarterly results. Snowflake shares plunged 20% early Thursday, while Pure Storage stock jumped 10% in pre-market trade. Meanwhile, Best Buy rallied 5% on results from Thursday, while investors await results from Kroger. Well, Kroger's probably going to stay a little bit steady. They're being driven on inflation, but it's like Best Buy. People are able to go in the store and just make impulse purchases now instead of going online and doing it the way that they had been doing so before. But as far as everything else goes, we'll see what says. The Snowflake thing kind of surprises me because we talked about this because we talk about finance every morning when that was an IPO back in 2020. And now it seems like it's maybe not holding up as well as everybody thought that it was going to. Among the Dow Jones leaders, Apple inched higher, Microsoft traded down 0.3% in today's stock market, United Health, a Dow stock to watch, is nearing new buy point. Intel dragged 2.3% lower in early trade following a Morgan Stanley downgrade. Electric vehicle leader Tesla declined 0.7% in pre-market on Thursday. Among the volatile, headline-driven market, commercial metals, Northern Oil and Gas, Palo Alto Networks, and Ryan Specialty are among Thursday's top stocks to watch. Keep in mind that current stock market conditions should keep investors in cash and on the side. I don't know, man. If you're seeing metals jumping up that steadily everywhere across the board, with only a couple different types of metal that are not jumping up like that, I'm not going to give you official financial advice, but I'm looking. at where those metals are going to be going and what I can invest into at this point. And I'm not saying to buy X market, Y market, or Z market, or X stock, Y stock, or Z stock. But what I am saying is start to go and have a look and have your investor help you go and look what's going to be affected by the demand for all these new metals, because it's going to be a lot into manufacturing, whether it be here or overseas. So talk to your advisor. He can give you financial advice. I'm just a guy who yells into a microphone, but go and check that out. Microsoft and Tesla are IBD leaderboard stocks. Commercial Metals was featured in this week's Stocks Nearby Zone column. Ryan Specialty is an IPO leader. Ahead of Thursday's market open, Dow futures traded up less than 0.1%, while S&P futures lost 0.1%, and NASDAQ futures descended 0.3% in the morning trade. Among ETFs, NASDAQ 100 tracker Invesco QQQ Trust fell 0.2%, and the SPDR S&P 500 ETF added 0.2% before Thursday's open. The 10-year Treasury yield ticked down to 1.86% Monday morning, which isn't up, by the way, because it was at 1.77% yesterday. On Wednesday, the Treasury yield surged back up above 1.86%, so it jumped from, let's see, because they don't tell us where it jumped to, but it jumped over 9 points throughout the day, and then it dropped back down to 1.86%. On February 15th, the 10-year Treasury yield peaked above 2.06%, its highest level since August of 2019. Meanwhile, U.S. oil prices trimmed gains to about 2.5% on Thursday. West Texas Intermediate crude briefly traded above $1.16 a barrel before pairing gains. Federal Reserve Chief Jerome Powell is set to testify before Congress for a second straight day, Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. In prepared comments on Wednesday, Powell said, "We will use our policy tools as an appropriate to prevent higher inflation from becoming entrenched while promoting a sustainable expansion in a strong labor market. We have phased out our net asset purchases with inflation well above 2% and a strong labor market. We expect it will be appropriate to raise the target range for federal funds at our meeting later this month." In the Ukraine, Russian forces overcame the city of Kherson, becoming the first regional capital to come under Russian occupation since the start of the invasion. Ukrainian officials agreed to a second round of ceasefire talks scheduled for Thursday. The two countries held an earlier round of negotiations on Monday. First-time unemployment claims are expected to come in at 232,000 per Econoday estimates, which should be unchanged from the prior week, which I know they haven't been talking about that a whole lot because we're still losing 250,000 jobs a week. But that's what we see off of that. Let's grab one from CNN, and then we'll get into the main news of the day. Fear takes hold in markets as energy prices soar. This is a live blog from CNN, so this is by CNN Business. 16 hours ago, stocks surged thanks to big bank rally. U.S. stocks rebounded from Tuesday's steep losses. The market enjoyed a strong rally Wednesday, led by financial stocks. Banks rallied as long-term bond yields rose following Fed Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's comments about a likely rate hike later this month. Oil prices popped again as the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, but investors brushed off those worries. All 11 of the S&P sectors ended the day in the green. All 30 Dow stocks are higher as the market stages rebound. 30 for 30 isn't just the name of a popular sports documentary series on ESPN. It also describes the state of the Dow Jones Industrial Average on Wednesday. Every stock on the Dow is higher on Wednesday. Stocks surged even as oil prices continue to climb in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, after reassuring comments from the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell about the likelihood that interest rate hikes will be small and gradual. Solid earnings from Dow Components, Salesforce, and other companies helped too. Love to see the inflation report right now because I noticed they're not talking about that again. CAT, Dow, and Intel were among the blue chip averages leaders. Intel, whose CEO Pat Gelsinger attended Tuesday's State of the Union address to hear President Biden talk about the chip company's plans to build a new plant in Ohio, helped to lead a big rally in other semiconductor stocks too. Honk honk. The federal government getting in and getting involved in picking winners and losers in the private industry. Honk honk. Totally grassroots raise in Intel. The Dow was up about 700 points or 2.1% in late afternoon trading, more than making up for Tuesday's losses of almost 600 points. The Nasdaq and S&P 500 were in rally mode too, gaining 1.8% and 2.1% respectively. Only 31 stocks in the S&P were in the red, and all 11 sectors in the index were higher for the day. So it looks like, and I don't know where this goes entirely because I haven't listened to the minutes yet, but it looks like there's going to be a very gradual raise to the rate, but still a raise to the rate at a point now where we're printing money out of nowhere. And, you know, the big part is going to be the value in the houses. And I keep watching the housing market in something like this because this is what preceded the crash before. And it was the housing market that took everything else with it. And I don't know. I mean, this still makes me nervous. For me, it's not horrible because I'll be looking in and trying to find a way to get some property after the first of the year, one way or another, because I anticipate it's all going to be crashing anyway. And hopefully we'll be able to pick up some nice houses for 10 cents on the dollar, or pennies on the dollar, or something like that. But we will see what happens with that, where that goes. Let's get into the main news of the day. Before we get into that, I want to grab this one here from USA Today. And this was so important. No, never mind, it wasn't, because they still cut it back off. Never mind. But the fear porn is coming. And I did get to read a little bit of this before the cutoff was for it. It could happen tomorrow. Experts know disaster upon disaster looms for the West Coast. And it's looking like it's going to be earthquakes. We'll come back to this. I'll archive this and we'll talk about the fear porn that's coming off this because, I mean, we're getting to the point where, and I talked about this a little bit at the top, but we're getting to the point where we're starting to see some Ukraine fatigue. Nobody cares anymore. We're trying to find the next thing to be onto to get back to work, to get back to life. Twitter is trying to prop up the Ukraine thing right now. I just noticed that there was a botted trend of, I stand with Russia. And it's just a bunch of messages over and over again, a bunch of tweets that are the exact same words coming from various different accounts. But of course, all that I saw, because what I saw when I saw the botted messages was a bunch of screenshots, all that I saw was a bunch of people, once again, bitching about the fact that people were tweeting, hashtag I stand with Russia. And part of why I think that this is botted too, I don't think this is a troll farm Russian bot. I think this is a leftoid farm Russian bot farm that's doing this particular one. And I say this because, again, we get to the point where you can just come up and now you can go back and start bitching about it and start laying the blame on the MAGA people. I still to this day believe that this war was engineered to an extent by the US because it's very convenient coming into midterms to talk about the party that you spent the last 4 years saying was nothing but Russia propaganda, that espoused the president, who was supposedly a Russian asset. And now we're at war with Russia. And anybody who dares to question whether or not we should put troops on the ground in Ukraine is a Russian asset, a Russian pawn. They're finding another way to other people. And it's really scary. It really is. But as we're getting some of the Ukraine fatigue, it's time to go back and start looking at what the next disaster is going to be. And it appears that it might be earthquakes. Let's grab one from Reuters here to start off with. Russian troops enter strategic Ukrainian port of Kherson. Let's see where Kherson is on the map. Because I'm kind of curious off of this myself. Then we can go and have a look at what the strategy is. I like doing this too because, you know, the libertarians that say we should never be in any war whatsoever, which I tend to agree with that, try to go and make fun of the people who do think that they should be in a war by saying, hey, I'll get on board with you about going to war with something. You just point to that country on the map, which... That's why we're looking at the map right now, because if we're going to go back and talk about this, we should know where this stuff is. So it looks like this port that's coming up here, this is coming up from Crimea, which means they've had to go past Skadovsk and Nova to come up here to grab this port of Kherson, coming into the Black Sea. And if Russians control the port, then they control the shipping lanes that are coming up into Kiev, and to the rest of Ukraine. So it's strategic, and it's a massive city too. I mean, you'd have to be sitting on prime real estate like that, but it does look like they have entered that at this point. This is no author given. Russian troops were in the center of the Ukrainian port of Kherson on Thursday after a day of conflicting claims over whether Moscow had captured a major urban center for the first time in its 8-day invasion. Russia's defense ministry said it had captured Kherson on Wednesday, but an advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky responded that Ukrainian forces continue to defend the Black Sea port of about 250,000 people. Guess I didn't realize that was a major metropolitan area, but I guess Milwaukee's only less than 500,000, so that does kind of make sense. Milwaukee proper. Once you get out to the rest of Milwaukee County, you see a lot more of that. Madison, I don't think is even that big. I think Madison's about the 250,000 mark too. In Madison proper, of course. Not counting most of the UW students who don't have residence in the city. We are a people who broke the enemy's plans in a week, Zelensky said in the video address. These plans have taken years to write. They are mean, with hatred for our country, for our people. The capture of the strategic southern provincial capital, where the Dnipro River flows into the Black Sea, would be the first significant urban center to fall since Moscow launched its invasion on February 24th. Russian forces have yet to overthrow the government in Kiev, but thousands are reported to have died or been injured, and more than 1 million people have fled Ukraine amid the biggest attack on a European state since 1945. For many millions more inside Ukraine, it's time for guns to fall silent so that life-saving humanitarian assistance can be provided, UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi said in a tweet. Russia's attack has led to a barrage of international sanctions that threaten the global economic recovery from the Pinko-Pox and stoked fears of wider conflict as Western countries send arms to help Ukrainian military. Kherson Mayor Igor Kolikayev said late on Wednesday that Russian troops were in the streets and had entered the city council building. He called on civilians to walk the streets only in daylight and in ones and twos. There were armed visitors in the city executive committee today. He said, "I don't make any promises to them. I just ask them not to shoot people." The U.S. State Department called on Putin and the Russian government to immediately cease this bloodshed and withdraw forces from Ukraine. It also accused Moscow of launching a full war on media freedom and the truth by blocking independent news outlets and social media to prevent Russians from hearing the news of the invasion of Ukraine. Russia calls its actions in Ukraine a special operation that is not designed to occupy territory but to destroy its neighbors' military capabilities and capture what it regards as a dangerous nationalists. So, Kherson, yes, does appear to have been taken at this point. It's strategic. A lot of imports and exports can come through, and that's a pretty good-sized river, too, from what I can see. I mean, I know Ukraine's not as big as the U.S., but that is a beefy river, width-wise, so you could, at some points, get some pretty good-sized shipping vehicles through there, especially up in here. Down through here, not so much, but yep, all the way up through Zaporizhzhia, Dnipro, Kremenchuk, Cherkasy, and up into Kiev. But we'll see what happens off of that. From USA Today, this one I did archive. Russian attacks intensify as Mayor of Kharkiv vows city will always stand. Live Ukraine updates. From John Bacon, Matthew Brown, Selena Tibor, and Joey Garrison. Russia's invasion of the Ukraine entered its 7th day Wednesday, with Russian military forces escalating attacks on civilian areas of Ukraine's largest cities as hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians flee the country. Volodymyr Zelensky, in a televised address to the nation, rallied his citizens and praised them for their resolve. "During this time, we have truly become one," Zelensky said. "We forgave each other. We started loving each other. We help each other. We are worried for each other." Russia claimed to have taken control of Kherson, the southern Ukraine city of almost 300,000. Kherson's mayor, Igor Nikolaev, however, denied the claim. In the besieged northeastern city of Kharkiv, Mayor Igor Terekov says the unrelenting rocket strikes have caused the massive destruction. Food, medicine, and other supplies are being distributed at several central locations and by trucks rolling through the city. Efforts are underway to provide heat to thousands who have lost utilities as temperatures dip towards freezing. Kharkiv is holding on and will hold on, Terekov said on Ukrainian TV. Today the main goal of our enemy is to sow panic and devastation, but Kharkiv will always stand. The UN Human Rights Council reported 136 civilian deaths, but the true toll was likely much higher. Ukrainian emergency services, meanwhile, say more than 2,000 Ukrainian civilians have died. So, we're looking at Kharkiv, but Kharkiv, I guess, has not fallen. But they're saying that it'll always stand, and nobody knows whether Kherson has fallen or not. And all this because we wouldn't give that moose and squirrel back in the 50s and 60s. Let's grab one from Axios. Satellite images show devastation in the Ukraine. Burning homes and impact craters in rural Ukraine out here. In a nice, what looks like probably was a nice subdivision beforehand. Newly released satellite imagery underscores destruction of Russia's invasion has wrought on several Ukraine cities as the war enters its second week. In the Maxar Technologies images for the week, buildings and factories in the residential areas of several towns and cities appear to be leveled. The images reveal long lines of Ukrainians waiting for food at grocery stores in Chernihiv and Kiev on Monday. Border crossings also seem to be jammed at multiple entry points, along with borders of Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania. Heavy cloud cover has prevented the release of any newer satellite imagery over the past 2 days, and most of the images were taken last Monday. And yeah, there's another crater right there. Destruction right there. I don't see a lot of problem with this one. Maybe some burnt out farmland, but nothing real major here. Oh, that's the massive line of cars at the Luzanka immigration checkpoint along the Hungarian border. That's why there's no destruction. They're getting the hell out of there. Line of residents at the supermarket at Chernihiv. I don't see them. I don't know. But that's what we see off of that. That's, well, actually seeing some of what's going on here, and of course wondering whether or not any of this is doctored, faked, or anything, because I have not taken anything off of this particular invasion at face value. But the way that it's presented to us, yeah, you can see where the craters are, you can see where they're smoldering still, you can see the lines heading out of the country, and as presented, it's devastating. Let's grab one from our friends over at NPR. A Ukrainian man who enlisted after Russia's invasion gives an update a week later. This is from Bill Chappelle. And remember, don't donate to Russia, don't donate to Ukraine, donate to NPR. They need your money to spread communism the way that Russia is spreading communism, but not in the way that Russia is, because Russia is our geopolitical existential enemy, and we don't want to spread anything to them. So make sure you get those donations out to NPR, because then they can take small, quiet microphones and tell you what it is that they want you to think, and spread their communist ideals around the country. Never printing reality, National Progressive Radio. Let's see what it is that they have to say. Volodymyr Omelian is among the thousands of Ukrainians who rushed to enlist after Russia invaded Ukraine last week. Speaking to NPR by phone on Wednesday, he said he's confident Ukraine will prevail despite facing Russia's much larger military. "We are 100% sure that we will win," he said in an interview on Morning Edition. "No doubt about that. Definitely." Ukrainian military officials say their forces have managed to secure several notable victories against Russia's military, but they warned that the Russians seem to be adjusting their strategy. Russia is relying on the criminal tactics of long-range shelling of peaceful cities, Ukraine's defense minister Alexei Reznikov said in an update on the fight. Almalayan concurs that the assessment, but he said Russia's approach might backfire, saying it's provoking not only terror among citizens but anger. "They're trying to spread panic among civilians, bombing them, but they get different response to such actions. People are getting furious, and people are ready to kill Russians, every civilian, which has never took any kind of gun in their hands." Almalayan was once Ukraine's infrastructure minister, but now he's positioned in Kiev with Ukraine's territorial defense forces. He said that while Ukraine's military still needs weapons and armor, it's having real successes against Russia's vaunted force. "They were always saying that it's like second army in the world, but it turns out to be very weak, and we crushed their brigades." Yeah, it still doesn't seem like they're sending their A-team here, like they're sending their best. Typical street in Ukraine. How do you spend your spring 2022? So, there are your updates right there. Plus, it is now, the ministry is saying 498 personnel and 1,500 were killed and 1,597 injured. That's your military personnel. Yeah, look at that. That's going to take a little while to clean up, I'm guessing. Just a little bit. Let's grab one from the Dissociated Press. Moving in on the financial side of this, live updates. Ukraine gets $34 million in crypto donations, which again is probably what's holding Bitcoin up right now. And I might actually look and see what's going on in Shibu too. Because if they're going to go buy it so they can send it out over there, they're still buying it. There's still a demand for it. And that's when you can get a relatively lot of, relatively quickly and relatively cheaply. A firm that tracks crypto transactions says that $33.8 million in digital currency has been donated to Ukraine's government and NGOs since the start of the Russia invasion, nearly a third of it on Tuesday. Tom Robinson of Elliptic said most donations to date have been in Bitcoin and Ether. Ethereum, probably. Some are sending non-fungible tokens or NFTs to the Ukrainian government's Ethereum account. Ukraine issued a plea for contributions on Twitter last week. To date, it has received 30,000 donations, including 5.8 million from Gavin Wood, the British programmer who co-founded Ethereum. There have been several other donations of more than $1 million US. Elliptic also warned of scammers tricking unsuspecting crypto holders wanting to donate to Ukrainian causes. Yeah, definitely something to watch for. So, that's a bunch of money. And again, we did see Bitcoin make a very significant jump just throughout this week. Over the weekend and up until now. So, and that's probably part of what's going with it. Because it's, if you're putting money over through a bank, through US currency, it's very traceable. They can bring it back to you. And they can find a way to either punish you, bring you out on the news, make you public enemy number one for Russia for donating to the Ukrainian cause, anything else like that. But in crypto, it can still be done, as we've seen under numerous occasions. But they tell me it's a lot harder, unless it's Bitcoin, which once again, I think that glows a little bit because, just look back at the pipeline. Let's grab one from CNBC. You know the answer to that, Arvold. You know the answer to that. Biden says U.S. and allies making Putin's war funds worthless. Defiant Zelensky says, we fight. From CNBC staff. Also a live blog. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke to President Biden about efforts to curb Russian aggression after his latest appeal to EU lawmakers to allow Ukraine to join the 27-member bloc. His outreach comes as fighting continues in several Ukrainian cities, and a huge Russian convoy heads towards the capital, Kiev. Ukrainian's government said a strike took out a TV tower in Kiev. Meanwhile, Western diplomats and ambassadors walked out of UN Human Rights Council on Tuesday when Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's pre-recorded address began to play. A number of officials at the meeting condemned Russia's attack on Ukraine as a violation of international law. Well, I maybe wouldn't have done that. I maybe would have heard them out to see what it is that they're actually demanding, instead of just walking out of the negotiations on a pre-recorded video. Now, yes, Lavrov should have been down there and actually making the claim himself, not a pre-recorded message, but still. Biden rallied allies Tuesday night and praised joint economic measures imposed on Russian President Vladimir Putin's economy. What? We're cutting off Russia's largest banks from the international financial system, Biden said. Putin is now isolated from the world more than ever, he added, referencing retaliatory measures taken for Kremlin's war in Ukraine. Biden said that the U.S. and his allies were making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless by preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble. So that's fun. We have a true nuclear power out there, and you want to get up on TV and brag about the fact that you're putting the fucking screws to them. And a person who's clearly not afraid of you either. Let's grab another one here from the Associated Press. Russians start feeling the heat of Ukraine war sanctions, from Dasha Litvinova. So they just have like currency exchanges out there. People walk past the currency exchange office displaying the exchange of rates of US dollar and euro to Russian rubles in Moscow's downtown Russia. In the days since the West imposed sanctions on Russia over its invasion of the Ukraine, ordinary Russians are feeling painful effects from payment systems that won't operate and problems withdrawing cash and not being able to purchase certain items. There are people waiting at the ATM to go get their cash. More exchange rate. An Apple reseller. Apple announced it will stop selling its iPhone and other popular products in Russia, along with limiting services like Apple Pay as part of a larger corporate backlash. To prevent the invasion, dozens of foreign and international companies have pulled their businesses out of Russia. That's cool, Apple. Are you going to stop selling in China, in the Uyghur region? Or stop selling stuff that's made by Uyghur slaves? Let's read. In the days since the West imposed sanctions on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, ordinary Russians are feeling the painful effects from payment systems that won't operate and problems withdrawing cash to not being able to purchase certain items. Apple Pay hasn't been working since yesterday. It was impossible to pay with it anywhere, in a bus, in a cafe, Tatiana Usmanova told the Associated Press. Plus, one supermarket, they limited the amount of essential goods one person could buy. Apple announced it would stop selling its iPhone and other popular products in Russia, along with limiting services like Apple Pay, as part of a larger corporate backlash to protest the invasion. Dozens of foreign and international companies have pulled their businesses out of Russia. Major car brands halted exports of their vehicles. Boeing and Airbus suspended supply of aircraft parts and service to Russian airlines. Major Hollywood studios halted their film releases, and the list will likely keep growing. That's on top of the US and other Western nations hitting Russia with sanctions of unprecedented breadth and severity. They have thrown major Russian banks off of SWIFT international payment system, limited high-tech exports to Russia, and severely restricted Moscow's use of its foreign currency reserves. Russians in Moscow and other cities talked to the Associated Press about how those moves have played out in their daily lives, pointing to certain problems with converting rubles into foreign currency, as long lines at ATMs, and certain bank cards failing them. Irina Bryukova in Yaroslavl, a city about 250 kilometers northeast of Moscow, said that she could only deposit a limited amount of money into her bank account through the bank ATMs. The majority of ATMs of this bank don't work to deposit money, Bryukova said. Food prices, according to some businesses, have started soaring too. All the main ingredients we prepare our products from have gone up in price by 30 to 40%, said Ilya Oktavin, who runs a delivery service at Perm Sushi Bar. I thought that they would just be eating a lot of borscht. Certain goods are also harder to come by because of actions by companies like Nike, which on Tuesday halted these online sales with a statement, the company website, saying it can't guarantee delivery of the goods to shoppers in Russia on Wednesday. H&M announced suspending all sales in the country. Kremlin critics are painting a bleak picture for Russia. So that's what we see coming out of that. It's a weird time. But also looking in at this, Vladimir Putin and the people who are under his cabinet are looking down at the people of Russia, who he usually doesn't care about because he's a central plant kind of guy, but still, on this matter, the people that he was tasked to protect are suffering right now. And they're suffering hard. It's not just the government. But that's what we see off of that. Let's grab another one from CNBC. Visa and MasterCard block Russian banks from their networks after sanctions. From Arjun Karpal. Excuse me. Payments and credit card giants Visa and MasterCard have blocked financial institutions from their networks in response to sanctions targeting Russia after the invasion of Ukraine. Last week, Russia launched an unprecedented invasion of Ukraine. Unprecedented except for the invasion of Ukraine that took Crimea, forcing the U.S. and governments around the world to impose a series of sanctions aimed at cutting off Moscow from the global financial system. Last week, the U.S. placed a number of Russian individuals and financial institutions on a sanctions list called the Specially Designated Nationals List. It effectively blocks U.S. companies and people from doing business with any individual or entity on the list. Washington also sanctioned Russia's central bank on Monday. On Monday, MasterCard said it blocked multiple financial institutions from its payment network. Without naming companies or individuals, we will continue to work with regulators in the days ahead to abide fully by our compliance obligations as they evolve. Rival Visa has also blocked those on the sanctions list, saying Tuesday that it was taking prompt action to ensure compliance with applicable sanctions and are prepared to comply with additional sanctions that may be implemented. Visa and MasterCard also both pledged $2 million toward humanitarian relief funds for Ukraine. It comes after the US, Canada, and European allies agreed Saturday to remove key Russian banks from the interbank messaging system SWIFT. It means Russian banks won't be able to communicate securely with banks beyond its borders. The wide-ranging sanctions have caused a plunge in the value of the ruble. Citizens in Russia have also been waiting in long lines to withdraw cash from ATMs. So, yeah, they're feeling the screws. And again, I don't really care for where this is going. I don't. Not because I don't want to see Russia get punished for this, just the fact that they're beating the war drum and they have nuclear weapons that they appear very, very ready to launch at a moment's notice. So, I don't have the answers for this. Foreign policy is not my strong point because I'm very isolationist. I mean, we'll look at the map, we'll see what's going on with this, but foreign policy is not my strong point. I don't know what the answer is to keep Russia from launching nukes because they're feeling the screws. But I don't feel like this is it. Some of the gas news. Ørsted sticks to Gazprom deal, but halts Russian coal biomass purchases. Danish energy firm Ørsted has stopped sourcing Russian coal and biomass for its power plants, but will continue to buy up to 2 billion cubic meters of natural gas from Gazprom per year under a long-term contract. Well, if you're under contract, Kind of have to at that point. Or face either war or sanctions of your own. Ørsted, formerly named Dong Energy, and it's all in caps, so it's Big Dong Energy, sold its oil and gas assets in 2017 to focus on offshore wind, but a supply deal signed with Gazprom in 2006, which runs until 2030, remains in place. Ørsted, which is 50.1% owned by the Danish state, said it would continue to buy gas from the Russian state-controlled gas firm despite criticism from Danish lawmakers. Western allies have tried to isolate Russia economically following Moscow's invasion of Ukraine last week. Shortfalls rather than gas supplies will, as opposed to stopping supply of other types of products, have severe human and societal consequences, Ørsted chief executive Mads Nipper said in a statement on Sunday. The dependency on Russian gas and any ban on the import of gas from Russia needs to be decided and enforced by clear sanctions, Nipper said, urging for a clear and coordinated effort from the EU and the UK. Ørsted could not legally breach a Gazprom contract, a spokesperson for the Danish company said. Denmark gets roughly 75% of its natural gas through pipelines from Germany, and Nipper told Danish daily Berlingske that the vast majority of it's outsourced by Ørsted's Gazprom contract. Ørsted declined to say exactly how much gas it buys from Gazprom. Ørsted also said it had stopped sourcing Russian biomass and coal for its power stations, of which only one is coal-fired, and is not entering into new contracts with companies or using suppliers from Russia. Now, it's interesting to note, like with Ørsted and what's going on with that while they only have one coal-fired plant for generation of electricity, that's true, you also have to look at, because they're talking about all the windmills that they're going to build. Now, it's Denmark, so the first thought is gigantic wooden windmills. It's also another thing from the Netherlands. In that region of the country, that's how they did flour milling for years and years and years and years on end. I'm sorry, in that region of the world, not the region of the country. In that region of the world, big wooden windmills are prime. But for something to have a very, very lasting effect, be able to stay up and be able to be put up if some sort of storm does take it down, you're looking at steel. And with steel, you're looking at coal to forge the steel. And I do have to wonder what kind of a dent that's going to put on new windmill production for the Danish. But we'll see what happens with that. Let's grab one from Fox News. Russia-Ukraine war, Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich set to sell Chelsea as pressure mounts. From Ryan Gatos. Oligarch Roman Abramovich succumbed Wednesday to growing pressure to sell English soccer club Chelsea FC over Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. Abramovich released a lengthy statement giving his reasoning. While he hasn't called on Russia to stop its invasion of Ukraine, he said the proceeds from the sale would go to benefit war victims. I would like to address speculation in media over the past few days in relation to my ownership of Chelsea FC, he said in a statement. As I have stated before, I have always taken decisions with the club's best interest at heart. In current situation, I have therefore taken the decision to sell the club. I believe this is in best interest of club, the fans, the employees, as well as the club sponsors and partners. The sale of the club will not be fast-tracked, but will follow due process. I will not be asking for any loans to be repaid. This has never been about business nor money, nor for me, but about pure passion for a game and club. Moreover, I have instructed my team to set up charitable foundation where all net proceeds from the sale will be donated. So, I wonder who's going to buy it, first off. I don't know much about soccer, unfortunately, so I don't know what the politics are in the purchase of this, but I do wonder who's going to buy this, who's going to pick that up. Hey, maybe Hunter can go buy it. He loves making deals in Europe, or having deals made for him. I will be stepping away for just a second.
And I didn't transfer out my scene, so you guys all saw me get up too. That happens sometimes. But yeah, I mean, as far as soccer goes, that's one thing to come back out and look for, is what the politics are for it. Hey, yeah, maybe Quest Fanny can afford it. There you go. Let's look at more of some of the Russian people out there. Oligarchs move yachts as U.S. looks to hunt down and freeze assets. From Brian Schwartz. Some of Russia's wealthiest are moving their super yachts, potentially with the hope that they can avoid having these items seized. Let's see what it says in the article here. Super yachts owned by Russian billionaires who have ties to Vladimir Putin are on the move as the U.S. and its allies prepare further sanctions of their property following the invasion of the Ukraine. Data reviewed by CNBC from Marine Traffic shows at least 4 massive yachts owned by Russian business leaders have been moving towards Montenegro and the Maldives since a wide array of sanctions were announced in recent days by leaders from around the world, including U.S. Treasury targeting Russia's central bank. The Maldives doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S., according to Nomad Capitalist. The property of targeted Russian executives is likely to take another hit, as the Biden admin recently announced the creation of a task force that will take aim at their lucrative assets, including yachts and mansions. France is putting together a list of properties owned by Russian oligarchs, including cars and yachts, that could be seized under sanctions by the EU. Why? It's private property. Let's see. This coming week, we will launch a multilateral transatlantic task force to identify, hunt down, and freeze the assets of sanctioned Russian companies and oligarchs, their yachts, their mansions, and any other ill-gotten gains that we can find and freeze under law. A White House's recent tweet reads, with that, some of Russia's wealthiest are moving their boats to other locations, potentially with the hope that they can avoid having those items seized. Vazit Alekperov, who is president of Russia-based Lukoil, is sailing his yacht to Montenegro. According to Marine Traffic, it's expected to arrive there in the coming days from Barcelona. Alekperov's yacht is known as the Galactica Supernova, according to the Super Yacht Fan, which tracks the comings and goings of these types of vessels. It features a 6-meter glass bottom swimming pool with a waterfall and a touch-and-go helipad, an elevator, and a large beach club. Alekperov has a net worth of just under $25 billion, according to Forbes. Montenegro is a member of NATO. Its foreign minister said Montenegro, which applied for EU membership in 2008, will join the EU in its sanctions against Russia. At least 3 yachts owned by other Russian billionaires are getting closer to the Maldives, a small country located in the Indian Ocean. The island nation has been a hotspot for tourists from Russia over the years. The Maldives tourism minister says Russia's invasion will have a major impact on its tourism sector. So, and I mean, this is a part of what the big part, that the question that I have. Yes, I understand that these people are tied to Putin directly, but they're not government officials. What point does our government, what jurisdiction does our government have to come and take away cars, yachts, mansions? Especially, what do you do with a mansion? It's over there. You can't do anything with it. But one of the other thoughts that I've had about this is, why don't they, especially if there's a war effort out there that people are so concerned about, and there appears to be one, why don't you sell one of these yachts and help out your country? I understand you're going to sell it at a loss. But yeah, I mean, if you've got these assets, give some help to your country. They need it right now. Your ruble is worthless. There are probably people that are out there starving and dying because they can't get to the grocery store because of the lines. They can't get the fuel because it's all going to the military. Help some of these people out. You've got the means. But we'll see what happens with that. Let's grab another one here from NPR. The UN approves a resolution demanding that Russia end the invasion of Ukraine. I don't know if this will go anywhere if we get lapped off, but we'll see what happens with this. This is from Peter Granitz and Joe Hernandez. And remember, again, they can't spread their communist ideals unless you donate. So donate to NPR. They need your money. I mean, our money, comrade. Never Printing Reality, National Progressive Radio. The UN General Assembly on Wednesday approved a non-binding resolution condemning Russia for invading Ukraine and demanding that it withdraw its military forces. The vote came after a series of speeches during which the majority of countries called on Russia to end the violence in Ukraine, which has continued for nearly a week. Sergei Kislitsa, the Ukrainian ambassador to the UN, urged countries to vote in favor of the resolution in an emotional address that ended with applause from the chamber. It is already clear the goal of Russia is not an occupation only, it is genocide, Kislitsa said. Vasily Nebensia, Russia's ambassador to the UN, asked members to vote against the resolution, saying Western powers were exerting pressure on other countries to vote in favor, but Belarus and Syria were among the countries that spoke against the resolution. Ultimately, the resolution passed with overwhelmingly, wow, I can read this morning, with a vote of 141 to 5, with 35 abstentions. The 5 countries that voted against it were Russia, Belarus, Syria, North Korea, and Eritrea. I have no idea what Eritrea is. North Korea is allied with Russia, so are Belarus and Syria. Let's see what Eritrea is, because I'm curious. I've never heard of this country before. It's in Africa. I'm a little surprised. It is in the Horn of Africa, it looks like. Huh. Did that used to be something else? Or is that a breakoff from Ethiopia? Because I thought that Ethiopia had a coastline over there. I know we've got the disputed territory in Somalia on the border over there, but Eritrea, I'd never heard of that before. I thought that was just part of Ethiopia. But hey, now we know. The truth is, this war has been one man's choice and one man alone, President Putin. It was his choice to force hundreds of thousands of people to stuff their lives into backpacks and flee the country, says U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield. Those were President Putin's choices. Now it's time to make ours. The U.S. is choosing to stand with the Ukrainian people. Well, you don't speak for me, so... The measure's passage showed that a global anti-Putin coalition has been formed and is functioning. Volodymyr Zelensky said in a tweet after the vote, "The world is with us. The truth is on our side. Victory will be ours," Zelensky said. So, there you go. They're demanding Russia end the invasion. Will they do it? Probably not. Although they're having peace talks again, so we'll see what happens with that. Alright, last one, and then we'll move on to some other stuff here. From the Associated Press. Refugee count tops 1 million. Russians besiege Ukraine ports. From Jim Heinz, Uras Karmanow, Vladimir Isachenkov, and Dasha Litvinova. The number of people sent fleeing the Ukraine by Russia's invasion topped 1 million on Wednesday, the swiftest refugee exodus of the century, the UN. So wow, again, can't read. Said as Russian forces kept up their bombardment of the country's second biggest city, Kharkiv, and laid siege to 2 strategic seaports. The tally from the UN Refugee Agency, released to the Associated Press, amounts to more than 2% of Ukrainians' population being forced out of the country in less than a week. The mass evacuation could be seen in Kharkiv, where residents desperate to get away from falling shells and bombs crowded the city's train station and tried to press onto trains, not always knowing where they were headed. In a videotaped address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called on the Ukrainians to keep up the resistance. He vowed that the invaders would not have one quiet moment and described Russian soldiers as confused children who have been used. Moscow's isolation deepened when most of the world lined up against it at the UN to demand it withdraw from Ukraine, and prosecutors for the International Criminal Court opened investigations into possible war crimes. With fighting going on multiple fronts of the country, Britain's defense ministry said Mariupol, a large city on the Azov Sea, was encircled by Russian forces, while the status of another vital port, Kherson, a Black Sea shipbuilding city of 280,000, remained unclear. So that's what we see off of that. And it looks like we've got some intel on where things are moving, allegedly, again, taking this at face value from the MSM, where there is an offensive that is moving into Kherson from the Crimean side of this main river, from Mariupol up into Donetsk, which is one of the disputed regions. Kharkiv, obviously, that's one we've been talking about. There is another incursion going on into Chernihiv, and 3 military gathering points gathered up outside of Kiev. So that's what we see off of that strategically. And that's what we see over on the other side of the world. A lot of stuff moving, but it does seem, again, like a lot of Twitter is getting a lot of fatigue. They're starting to get sick of talking about the Ukraine because nothing's happening. At least not fast enough for them to do it. But we'll see what happens with that. Let's grab one from News Channel 8. Moving on, talking about some things happening on our side of the world. This is ridiculous. DeSantis scolds students for wearing face masks during USF visit. Governor Ron DeSantis made his frustration with face masks known when he visited Tampa for a press conference Wednesday morning. DeSantis was at the University of South Florida to announce funding for cybersecurity education before taking the podium to address the audience. The governor scolded a group of students behind him for wearing face masks. "You do not have to wear those masks," Governor DeSantis said. "I mean, take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything. We've got to stop with this theater." I'm avoiding the rest of that paragraph for a reason, because that seems to be what the rest of the mainstream media has ignored. Hillsborough School District told 8 on Your Side that there were 7 children in attendance at the press conference who were all students at Middleton High School in Tampa. "We're excited for our students from Middleton High were highlighted as part of a statewide focus around cybersecurity education," said Hillsborough School Superintendent Edison Davis. "Our cybersecurity pathway at MHS has had a tremendous success through students' earning industry certifications, participation in internships, and leading the way in computer systems and information technology. As always, our students should be valued and celebrated. It is a student and parent's choice to protect their health in a way that they feel most appropriate. We are proud of this manner in which the students represented themselves and our school district." So, evil DeSantis, scolding these people. Oddly enough, in this article, there's no video. And then the response, to read the full article: "Stop bullying kids." Students and parents respond to Governor DeSantis telling students to take off their masks. "He's a bully." We can't see why he's a bully, but he's a bully. Look at him. Well, let's have a look. Let's actually see what happened here. Thank you to The Blaze for always having video up here ready to go with this. From The Blaze, DeSantis tells students they can take off their masks, fumes over COVID theater at viral video. From Phil Shiver. Let's just watch the video.
You do not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous.
All right. Well, it's good to be at USF.
That actually seems kind of innocuous to me. It almost seems like he was joking with him a little bit here, trying to be friendly with him here. This doesn't sound like bullying. And we'll go and see if we can find a little bit quieter one here, because there are a couple other ones, or maybe from a different angle. But let's listen to this one from Clay Travis.
You do not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous.
All right. Well, it's good to be at USF.
Oh, this one they're going to kick me onto another one.
It's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous.
All right. Well, it's good to be at USF.
You do not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to.
Yeah, I mean, there's laughing. He looks like he's walking up with a smile on his face. He's presenting his case. I maybe wouldn't have gone to it that fiercely with the way that I worded it. Obviously, with the same tenor and tone, I would, but he might have worded it in a way that I wouldn't have. But, I mean, this does not feel like anger, berating, or bullying. This just feels like a guy coming in, talking to his constituents, wanting to make sure that they feel comfortable with him. So, I don't know. That's the way I take it out of it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But that's what I took out of it. From the Hill. House passes bill making lynching a federal hate crime. From Christina Marcos. The House passed legislation on Monday that would classify lynching as a federal hate crime. Which, by the way, white on black violence with intent because of race is already a hate crime. And murder is already illegal. Lawmakers easily passed the bill, which is named after Emmett Till, a 14-year-old African-American boy who was lynched in '55 on a 422-3 vote. While the bill sailed through with bipartisan support, 3 Republicans, Andrew Clyde, Thomas Massie, and Chip Roy, voted against it. The legislation's passage comes more than 120 years after the first federal anti-lynching legislation was introduced by then Rep. George Henry White, who was the only black member of Congress at the time. Our nation endured a shameful period during which thousands of African Americans were lynched as a means of racial subordination and enforcing white supremacy. These violent incidents were largely tolerated by state and federal officials, and they represent a stain on our nation's legacy, said House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler. Today, we acknowledge the disgraceful chapter in American history, and we send a clear message that such violent crimes, motivated by hatred and bigotry, will not be tolerated in this country, Nadler said. The bill, offered by Bobby Rush of Illinois, would designate lynching as a hate crime punishable by up to 30 years in prison. More than 4,700 lynchings occurred in the U.S. between 1882 and 1968. According to an estimate from the NAACP, black people made up most of the victims of lynching, since typically white perpetrators would use the attacks to terrorize them. The highest number of lynchings were in Mississippi, where Till was beaten and shot in the head by 2 white men for allegedly flirting with a white woman. An all-white jury found the 2 men not guilty of Till's murder, but the men later admitted in a magazine interview a year later that they had in fact killed Till. The House previously passed the bill in 2020, but Rand Paul objected to clearing it by unanimous consent in the upper chamber. Paul's objection came even though the Senate had previously passed a version of the bill in 2018 by unanimous consent. Paul said he was concerned it might conflate lesser crimes like minor assaults to lynching. And that's part of the problem that we have with this. And, you know, part of some of the language that goes with this. I mean, if we look at what happened with the St. George riots, particularly, what happened to St. George? What has been called a lynching, a modern-day lynching. Breonna Taylor, a modern-day lynching. Trayvon Martin, they called that a modern-day lynching. They are changing out the definition. I mean, a lynching is completely different than any other form of what they call hate crime, which is already illegal. Assaults, violence, and killing with malicious intent due to race as the predominant factor. And in spite of the fact that in the Breonna Taylor situation, and in the St. George situation, and even in the Jacob Blake situation, None of this was because race was a predominant factor in it, but they still try to come back and sell it to you as that race was the predominant factor, as the main factor in this. And Paul is right. Once they get this bill out there, they'll start putting lesser crimes into this. I would come to say, possibly, with the way things are going, this would possibly even go into either making new crimes, especially involving police and black people, or using non-violent means, like mean words on social media, and calling those lynching. Because you know that they'll redefine words on a whim. They've shown that before. And again, murder is already illegal. And violence towards another person with racial intent is already illegal. Now they're not, because it has to get through the Senate, and I don't think it will. Now they're super secret, double, extra illegal. Some more courts news for us. Supreme Court case could severely limit the unchecked power and sway of federal bureaucracy, starting with the EPA. So this is from earlier on in the week, something from Tuesday that we weren't able to get to, but something I definitely wanted to talk about. This is from Phil Shipper, and a little bit of a balance between how The Blaze is covering this versus how CNN is covering this. The Supreme Court heard arguments in a case on Monday that could potentially rein in the broad authority currently enjoyed by the EPA and several other federal bureaucracies as well. In West Virginia versus EPA, specifically wrestles with the scope of the environmental agency's authority to regulate air pollution by mandating sweeping greenhouse gas emissions benchmarks for the country's power plant industry. Since 2009, various presidential admins have sought to curb carbon dioxide emissions from the country's power plants by delegating overarching regulatory power to the EPA. No, only one president has done that. Only one administration has done that since 2009. Because it didn't happen from 2016 to 2020. In turn, unelected officials at the EPA set varying emissions limits on each state in an effort to slow global warming and in the process, raising the specter of incurring massive costs on the country's power suppliers. Interestingly, at the time that this case was heard, no EPA rule was in place. The fact has alarmed environmental advocates who fear the conservative majority of the Supreme Court will preemptively undermine the Biden admin's attempts to limit power plant emissions. President Brandon pledged to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 50% over the next decade. In their petition before the High Court, the coal industry, representatives, and attorneys general from 19 predominantly Republican states argue that the EPA is operating outside the bounds of its authority when it implements sweeping emissions limits. Though the court did not clearly telegraph an outcome in the case, conservative justices on the bench did perhaps hint at a direction that it may go by raising concerns about whether the power often exercised by the EPA went beyond that which was granted by Congress, The Hill reported. So with this, and with the way that this is laid out from The Blaze, I very much agree with this. I do. Because every time we get another alphabet agency, and this goes beyond the EPA, we could start seeing things with the FBI because of this. We could start seeing things with the CIA, even though they, for the most part, operate outside of our borders. We could start seeing things with a host of other agencies in the government who are running down directly, circumventing the 10th Amendment to give the executive branch sweeping power extra legislatively. And here's a big one. If this goes through the way that's presented by The Blaze, if this goes through and they still want to have these laws on the books, the legislators will have to legislate instead of having this all come as executive order, executive fiat from an executive agency. Which I'd kind of like to see that, actually. I'd like to see how that goes and how that works. Whether they legislate or whether this becomes a states' rights issue. Which it should be a states' rights issue to begin with, but they really do need to legislate. So, that's what we see off of that. From CNN. Reading this on the other way. The Supreme Court is hearing a major case on the EPA's authority over planet-warming gases. Here's what's at stake. From Ella Nilsson. The EPA faces a Supreme Court case on Monday that could deal a significant blow to the federal government's ability to fight the climate crisis and prevent its worst outcomes. Republican attorneys general argue the EPA has no authority to regulate planet-warming emissions from the power sector. Instead, they say the authority should be given to Congress, which it should. The case also has enormous implications for Biden's climate agenda, with legislative action on climate looking uncertain at best. The Supreme Court decision siding with the coal companies could undercut in an important way the administration plan to slash emissions at a moment when scientists are sounding the alarms at the accelerating pace of global warming. The power sector is the country's second largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Power emissions rose last year, mainly driven by coal. Experts say West Virginia versus EPA is a highly unusual one because there's no current EPA rule on power plant emissions. Plaintiffs are asking the court to block EPA from implementing future rules. All of this feels quite unprecedented, Jody Freeman, a Harvard Law School professor and former Obama admin official, told CNN. Here's what you need to know about the case and possible outcomes. So we're just going to go over a little bit of the history on where this goes. And we've discussed the possible outcomes already, but I want to get a little bit of a history lesson on where this started. West Virginia AG Patrick Morrissey is the main plaintiff of the case, joined by Republican AGs from more than a dozen other states. Morrissey's office is also representing two coal companies, North American Coal Corporation and Westmoreland Mining Holdings. The plaintiffs are challenging the EPA's authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions coming from power plants and saying the power should be taken away from the agency and given to Congress, which it should. I think this is really about a fundamental question about who decides the major issues of the day, Morrissey said in a media event earlier this month. Should it be unelected bureaucrats or should it be people's representatives in Congress? That's what this case is all about. Yes. And again, think about all of the other alphabet agencies that this could deal a blow to that are operating legislatively. U.S. power plants have historically generated electricity by burning coal. However, coal use is declining as renewables and natural gas have grown in the power sector. So, with what we're seeing off of this, again, I don't have a problem with regulating out emissions. I don't. I think that's a good thing. But I don't think it should just be a sole executive branch without any sort of way for people to be able to come in and weigh in. And that's one of the things that we're seeing off of this. That's one of the things that we're seeing with these unelected bureaucratic executive branches, the ones that are controlling the White House. Because it's not Biden right now. A number of these things could have been decided at a legislative level, or should have been, because then these people have to either do what it is that their constituents want, whether it be the states or the individual districts, depending on whether it's the Senate or the House of Representatives, or face recall, or primary challenges when they get home every other year or every 6 years. Department of Education should be gone. EPA should be gone. Or at least limited in their scope. Like with the EPA. The EPA would make a good enforcement agency if Congress did decide on doing something, if they were able to do something. But one of the big fears, one of the hardest parts for people like this author at CNN, Ella Nilsson, one of the hardest things for them to wrap their heads around right now is the fact that things should be done legislatively, that people should have an input. They think that because this is the existential crisis of the world, then they should be able to just jump up, snap their fingers, and get their way at a moment's whim by executive fiat rather than legislation. Let's grab this one here quick. We're going to grab a couple other ones a little bit out of order just to get through this here, but I gotta head out of here too. So let's grab this one here quick from MSN. Greg Abbott and Beto O'Rourke win primary races, setting up midterm election battle for Texas governor. From Aaron Parsley. Tonight, Republicans sent a message. Governor Greg Abbott and Beto O'Rourke will face off in November after winning primary races Tuesday as the 2022 midterm elections finally kicked off in Texas. Tonight, Republicans sent a message, Greg Abbott, a Republican incumbent, said at a rally in Corpus Christi to celebrate his win Tuesday against a handful of GOP challengers. They want to keep Texas the land of opportunity and prosperity for absolutely everybody, the prosperity that we have delivered over the past 8 years. Abbott, who is 64, secured approximately 68% of the vote, according to the Texas Tribune. His closest challengers were Ellen West and Don Huffines, who came in with 12.3% and 11.9%, respectively. So, no word on Beto O'Rourke on where he did or how he landed with all this, but yeah, it does look like both of those are going to be facing off, which is going to be an interesting race because Beto O'Rourke has a real problem with getting voted into office in a statewide race. He's really good at small Texas individual districts. He was a House rep for a long time. And I believe he was in a fairly progressive district, so he represented them well. But statewide, he doesn't have the appeal. He's cringe. He rides out on his skateboard. He shreds on his guitar. He eats the magic dirt. He's trying too hard, and it seems like he's having a midlife crisis. So that'll be coming up here in the midterm. The hearings are announced for the Supreme Court nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson. By Mary Claire Jelinek. The Senate Judiciary Committee said Wednesday that confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson will begin on March 21st, keeping the Senate on track for a possible final vote next month. Dick Durbin, the committee chairman, announced the hearing schedule on Wednesday as Jackson was holding the first meetings with senators on Capitol Hill. Jackson met in the morning with Senate Majority Leader Chuck U. Schumer and Senate Republican Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. She planned to see Durbin on the committee's top Republican, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, in the afternoon. As is tradition, the hearings will last 4 days, with the opening statements on March 21st and testimony and questioning the next 2 days. The fourth day will include testimony from outside witnesses. If confirmed, Jackson would be historic, the first black woman to serve as a justice on the court's 200-plus year history. Breyer has said he won't leave the bench until this summer when the court session is over, but Democrats are still moving quickly, taking no chances that there's any shift in the 50-50 Senate where Vice President Harris provides the deciding vote. After Schumer and Jackson sat down at the Capitol to talk, Schumer said the Senate will move to the nomination fairly but expeditiously. What they should do, and like I said, I've been on this before. I don't particularly want to see Jackson be a Supreme Court justice, but I mean, it's not going to change any ideological balance. If she was replacing Roberts, I would have other things to say about this. But as we're sitting right now, as we're seeing this and as we go, I mean, she does have the pedigree. She's got the background for this. She's got the experience for this. She's young. She ticks all the equal opportunity boxes, the diversity hire boxes. She ticks all of those very easily. And like I said, we don't want to be in a situation where this gets drug out into November by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm going to tell you right now, for Ketanji Brown Jackson, as much as I disagree with her ideologically, the best course of action for Republicans coming up into the midterms would be for her to be voted 99-0 tomorrow. Confirm her unanimously tomorrow. And live to fight another day. But I guess we'll see what the hearings are. Honestly, if I was Republican, if I was a Republican in the Senate, and I was on the committees for her, or even sitting in the House floor committees, I would just not be there for it. I would still say confirm her 99-0. But right now, just let the Democrats own this. If there is a problem, which, by the way, people in her own party, and especially the black ethno-nats in this country, don't like her. A lot of people on the left don't like her. But let the Democrats own it. Let the corporate Dems own this. This is theirs. All right, what else do we have here? We're going to wait on the mansion stuff because there's 3 articles for that. So with that, we're going to head out of here with Thing I Like and Thing That I Hate. And do I want to do this one out of here? No, we'll do that one tomorrow too. So let's do a thing that I like and a thing that I hate and head out of here for the day. So thing that I like, on days where I didn't necessarily prep, I've been coming back here and talking about, I used to sit back and talk about what I've been watching on Netflix, but I haven't really been doing a lot of that lately. But what I would like to do is start talking a little bit about what's been going on my Spotify, which is a lot more. Now, I don't necessarily do a lot of podcasts anymore because I gave up my spoken word listening, except for a little bit of Rogan, in exchange for real estate lessons, because I'm trying to get out of the job that I'm working at right now. But they still, even when I'm sitting back alone in a warehouse, let me listen to a bunch of music. And I put a bunch of stuff up. We talked about the Silver Sun pickups a couple weeks ago. Maybe embarrassingly, maybe not embarrassingly. I enjoy a little bit of the pop punk that came out in the early 2000s. I enjoy that a lot, actually. A lot of really heavy guitar-led music. A lot of stuff. There's a lot of acoustic stuff that's out there that's really good. But I've been listening to All Time Low a lot, and I found a video, of course, which I think is going to be modified enough because it's from a live performance that it's not going to trip the algorithms, and even if it does, we're demonetized anyway. But this is probably one of my favorite songs from the catalog. It's underrated. It didn't make a single, so it's called Toxic Valentine. We'll listen to a little bit here and talk a little bit about how it goes, the methodology of the lyrics, the chords, and just how awesome this song is. Let's listen.
The happier he'll be. Song's called Toxic Valentine. She's got a target painted on her back. She's a list of qualities are good. She gets her will, since her fire. Take a drink as the truth is satisfied.
Now, when you listen to bands like Plain White T's All Time Low, you definitely do get a very pop feel to them. But what's nice about going into bands like this and, different kinds of things like that is they do oftentimes have some roots in harder rock as well, which occasionally you'll get a song like this one that is completely different and separate from the rest of their catalog. A lot of guitar-led, a lot of drop D tuning, but not a lot of bear noises either. So you're not dropping into the big parts of heavy metal. So, one of my coworkers used to, we had a guy that worked with us when I worked in Madison that, that's all he did was the heaviest of metals. And one of the other guys that worked on the floor, that particular guy had been listening to dubstep one day. And another guy came up to me and says, "Oh, well, it's a good change. Instead of drop D tuning over bear noises." Describing the heavy metal guitars and the lyrics. But again, you've got the same kind of guitar, which I like that kind of guitar playing, but don't necessarily like the screaming lyrics. But I like that kind of guitar playing, but you still have a clear voice. And like a song like this, it's catchy in the melody. It's very guitar led, like I like. the lyrics will get stuck in your head for days. And I mean, we've all been in a relationship like that, except for those of us who went out and married the first girl that we ever dated. We've all been in a relationship like that. Very toxic, heartbeats red wine. It's no good for you, but you still want to be in it. We've all been there. We've all been there. I love the song, love the band, All Time Low. Go check them out on Spotify. Probably one of the better platforms to go check out music on. But besides that, they stood up and they still keep Rogan. So let's listen to a little bit more of this. Alright, that's enough of that before we get popped. Alright, now we'll do a thing that I hate. Coming to me, via Twitter from my former co-host, the Libertarian Redhead, Nashville police ask you to turn in your guns at a church with no compensation offered. This comes to us from Scoop Nashville. And before I even read into this, my first thought is, no. Not at all. We're not doing this. This is from Jason Steen. Nashville's Office of Alternative Policing Strategies wants you to know that they're excited to announce the launch of a new gun retrieval program in Nashville, already being referred to as the Bring Your Gun to Church program. Here's how it works. You bring a gun to church, your gun, your friend's gun, a stranger's gun. 2 of those are stealing, by the way. A stolen gun, an unwanted gun, any gun will do. You'll get nothing for it. That's it. That's the entire program, announced by Nashville Police. Prior to similar programs have included gift cards for guns or cash for guns, but no compensation is being offered in the program that launches on Tuesday. The program begins tomorrow with the help of several faith-based partners in an effort to reduce violent crime throughout the city. Last year, more than 1,300 guns were stolen from cars within Davidson County. So far this year, more than 70% of all guns reported stolen were taken from vehicles. A large portion of these stolen weapons were used to commit more violent crimes. Inspector David Imhoff and Lieutenant Stephen Bowers were starting this program with the goal of getting unwanted, potentially dangerous and stolen weapons off the streets and out of unsafe hands. Participating churches will now offer a no-questions-asked process where community members can anonymously turn in firearms. Church membership is not required to visit any of these locations. And again, how about no, Scott? First off, your gun. If you're going to go turn in something that you paid good money for, a lot of money for in cases, like just having my regular Smith, the last firearm that I purchased, $300 for a basic standard 9mm firearm. $300. That same gun in 6 Hour is probably close to $1,000. Your AR platform starts at $1,500 and goes up from there. So if you're going to give up $300 to sometimes upwards of $2,500 worth of firearm for no compensation, well, you probably vote for Democrats, let's just say that. For no compensation. But looking back at this too, now there's the other side of this. Your friend's gun, your stranger's gun, a stolen gun. 3 of these are crimes. 3 of these are federal crimes. Are you going to get immunity for that? No, I'm dead serious. Are you getting immunity if you come back in and bring in a firearm that you've committed a federal crime to get your hands on? Because I don't think that the Nashville Police Department has the authority to do that. I don't think the church has the authority to do that either. They can talk to God for forgiving you, but as far as what you have to do with the federal government, no, they don't have that authority. So, and there again, if you're stealing something worth upwards of $3,000 from a friend or a stranger, if you don't get shot trying to take something from a stranger first, you don't think there's going to be a retaliation somewhere for that? This is ridiculous. This is stupid. And this is why that's the thing that I hate. All right, but with that, I think we're done. So let's get some outro music up here, and let's head out of here for the day. So, with that, we're going to head out of here for the day. There may be someone in the schedule coming up here towards the end of the month. I don't want to talk too much in detail about it because it's an ongoing matter, but there might be some work here. You might see some different hosts for a couple days here while I get all the affairs in order. That'll be coming up in a few weeks though, so nothing to panic about now. But do come back here tomorrow where we will be on regular schedule when we talk about probably more stuff with Kiev and the Ukraine. We'll be talking about this weird murder that came out of Wisconsin, definitely, where a meth head went and hooked up with a guy and then cut him up and hit his head, and some Maxwell stuff, another representative who's not seeking re-election because he got caught with an ISIS bride. All kinds of fun stuff here. So come back here, join us tomorrow for more Contemporary, and until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.